Chapter 1021, Still Not Returning Here. Chapter 1021, Still Not Returning Here. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Feng Yuan's soul left the pure dream reality seeker physique body, he flew towards this mysterious rank 9 immortal Gu. The moment they interacted, Feng Yuan felt an immeasurable suction force. This immortal Gu, named Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu by Spectral Soul, seemed to be eager for a soul already. Feng Yuan's soul entered it, it was as if he had fallen into the whirlpools of falling heavenly river. At once, his soul was sucked in by the immortal Gu, he was blending into it at an unbelievable speed. Feng Yuan could not think, he felt that he was inside darkness that was unfathomably deep. This darkness was not cold, it was warm. It was like he had gone back into his mother's womb, he was like a fetus inside amniotic fluid. And outside. After Feng Yuan's soul entered the rank 9 immortal Gu, the sky rumbled loudly, it seemed furious, but helpless at the same time. Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu began to shine brightly. First, there was white light, from pale transparent light to pure white light, and finally to thick milky white light. Next, there was a hint of red inside the white light. The red quickly spread, turning the light into pale pink, before it turned pinkish red, and finally, bright red like fire. After red light, it turned into orange. After orange, it turned into yellow. Like the colors of the rainbow, it continued changing, until finally, the light became black. Inside the black-colored light, Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu twitched continuously, from the size of a thumb, it expanded to the size of a basin. Inside this dark ball, a fetus was shining brightly in rainbow light, it could vaguely be seen. Life force was gathering, it was growing and becoming stronger. White fog started to surround it. The temperature of the surroundings fell rapidly, fog turned into frost, covering the surface of the ball. Next, lightning shot out, surrounding the ball, forming a web of lightning. Lightning crackled as sparks were created. The sparks fell on the frost and did not extinguish, instead, the frost started burning. The frost turned into chi that surrounded the ball. Green patterns slowly appeared on the surface of the ball. Soon, they turned from phantom to solid, becoming countless vines and twigs. The twigs were wilted, while the leaves were green and lively. Soon, fruits began to grow around these leaves. These purple fruits emitted a fragrant smell. But the surface of the fruits were very ugly, there were many holes in them, like they were rotten. Many changes occurred, they were unimaginable. On the surface, they looked random and abrupt, but if one observed carefully, they seemed to contain the profoundness of heaven and earth. As the changes continued to occur, the fetus inside the ball grew larger. Eventually, after a total of 81 changes, the ball turned into mud. As the fetus inside was at its largest, a baby was formed, stretching his 4 limbs. At once, the ball that surrounded him cracked, the baby was born. This baby had a lively expression, his eyes were shining like stars, he had pale and fair skin, his limbs were chubby, his face was rosy, cute and delicate, immortal aura was oozing from him. A formless force surrounded his entire body, it protected him from damage, he was safe and sound. The baby gradually landed on the ground. During this process, he grew rapidly. From the time of his birth to when he was 2 to 3 years old physically, only a breath of time had passed. 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, 12 years old, when his legs landed on the ground, he was already a 16-year-old young lad. His skin was still white, but it was not pale white, nor a feminine pinkish white, it was a white that was clean and simple. His long hair was black and shiny, extending to his waist. His body was slightly thin, there was no excess flesh on his entire body. The bridge of his nose was high, the most attractive thing were his eyes. The starlight that was shining in his eyes had already become muted, they turned dark and deep like an abyss. His lips were quite rich, giving off a rosy and healthy glow. Right now, they were tightly pursed together, showing his mental state of being determined and unwavering. This youngster was naturally Feng Yuan. At this moment, he opened his eyes, looking at his young body. He was shocked, an entirely new body. The body that was created by Spectral Soul and the entirety of Shadow Sect. After countless years of hard work and effort, it was not as simple as it seemed. Regarding its traits, Fang Yuan had to explore further. But simply at this moment, Fang Yuan's first feeling was that this body was incomparably suited for his soul. In comparison, his previous immortal zombie body was like clothing made from twigs and leaves, and this new body was made with soft silk. Everything was different now. Fang Yuan felt that he had walked out of the darkness. He saw blue skies and white clouds. His perspective was broadened. This is the use of the sovereign immortal fetus Gu that Spectral Soul had painstakingly created. Revival. And having rank 6 cultivation level upon revival. Fang Yuan's Gu immortal aura was not fake. He had made the right gamble. Even though he did not know what the use of this immortal Gu was, seeing Spectral Soul float towards the immortal Gu personally, Fang Yuan knew he could do the same. As he thought about these things, Fang Yuan directed his gaze towards the sky. There, Spectral Soul was still in the dream realm. This was within Fang Yuan's expectations. After all, Spectral Soul's condition was really terrible. And Ning Wu Xie's body was no longer controlled by Fang Yuan's soul. It had already shut its eyes, floating in the air, unmoving. Fang Yuan called out, "Come back." Instantly, a large number of Gu worms flew out of Ning Wu Xie's body. Earlier, Fang Yuan's soul had entered the sovereign immortal fetus Gu. All of the Gu worms with him had stayed inside the pure dream reality seeker physique body. Now, Fang Yuan called out and retrieved these Gu worms. Attitude Immortal Gu, Unravel Mystery Immortal Gu, Change Soul Immortal Gu, and other Soul Path and Dream Path Mortal Gu. Ning Wu Xie still has a number of Dream Path Immortal Gu on his body. How can I retrieve them? Fang Yuan frowned, feeling troubled. He had used Change Soul earlier, using Attitude Gu to disguise himself and used the Immortal Killer move Lead Soul into Dream. Even though he succeeded in affecting Spectral Soul, the wills inside these Dream Path Gu worms had already reacted. Fang Yuan could not move them anymore. Not only the immortal Gu in his body, Ning Wu Xie's body itself has a lot of value for research. Fang Yuan suddenly turned around, seeing an immortal zombie approach him with an imposing demeanor. Fang Yuan's gaze flickered, his lips curled into a smile, thinking, "You are finally here." It was himself. Or more accurately, it was Ning Wu Xie's soul, who was manipulating Fang Yuan's former immortal zombie body. At this moment, Fang Yuan had just obtained a new body. He was still adapting. The number of Gu worms with him could not compare to the immortal zombie body. But Fang Yuan was not nervous. He waited for Ning Wu Xie to arrive. "You are?" Ning Wu Xie hesitated. He slowly approached Fang Yuan, assessing him closely. Fang Yuan purposely pretended to be close to him, placing his arms behind his back and saying, "Wu Xie, I have succeeded. Fang Yuan's soul has already been completely destroyed." "No. You are not my main body. If you are, with my relationship as a split soul, how can I feel no connection?" Ning Wu Xie's eyes shined with bright light. He reacted and exposed Fang Yuan's true identity. Oh, ghostly concealment became a flaw instead. But if I could use familiar face, I should have been able to deceive him. Fang Yuan thought while rubbing his chin. He couldn't help but laugh. He was so casual, a confident light flickered in his eyes, as if he was in control of the situation. "You are Fang Yuan." Ning Wu Xie understood. He gritted his teeth until they were making sounds. He was so angry he felt he was burning up. His anger was understandable. They had worked so hard, planning for countless years before seeing the fruits of their labor. But Fang Yuan actually snatched it from them now. Ning Wu Xie shouted loudly, pouncing towards Fang Yuan. He wanted to hack him into a million pieces. They were 100 steps away from each other. Fang Yuan showed a smile like his scheme had succeeded. "Ning Wu Xie, don't you find it strange? Fixed immortal travel is my immortal Gu, how could you activate it?" Ning Wu Xie's expression froze. Back then, he was anxious and used it subconsciously. He did not consider that point. Now that he was reminded by Fang Yuan, he knew something was amiss. His momentum was interrupted. You could use fixed immortal travel because I lent it to you. I wanted you to rush here. Most of my accumulations are still in this body. Fang Yuan said. Since he knew that he was going to change souls with Xianxia, with his personality and methods, why would he not set up some arrangements? Firstly, Fang Yuan concealed a huge amount of his fake will inside his mind. Because of this, when Xianxia woke up, he wanted to rush back and ignored many things that did not seem right. This was like what Mo Yao's fake will did to Fang Yuan in Imperial Court Blessed Land. Secondly, Fang Yuan injected some special will into his Gu worms. What were special wills? In 88 True Yang Building, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had left behind a vast number of special wills. He set up some specific situations and they would activate accordingly. Just like now. Fang Yuan looked at Xianxia approaching. As the smile on his face grew, he called out, "Still not returning here." Swoosh! A large number of Gu worms flew out. They were mostly mortal Gu, but there were immortal Gu mixed in them. Like birds flying back to their nests, they entered Fang Yuan's embrace. Xianxia stared with wide-opened eyes, immensely shocked. At that moment, he was all alone, without anything at his disposal. In his body, only Spring-Autumn Cicada was left, and he could not activate it. The situation on both sides flipped. Fang Yuan's arrangement was like this. As long as Xianxia brought Fang Yuan's body back to Tian Mountain, and heard someone call out, "Still not returning here," these Gu worms would fly out and go to that person. These Gu worms were originally Fang Yuan's. Now that they returned, they could be used at will, just like before. Back then, Fang Yuan did not know about the use of Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu. He could not predict that he would revive and obtain a new body. He was worried that it might not be appropriate for him to use Xianxia's Gu worms. Unexpected surprises could easily occur. He needed his own Gu worms to increase his battle strength at the crucial moment. Of course, the special will that Fang Yuan injected was not so simple. Once the time limit was exceeded, these Gu worms, no matter if they were mortal or immortal, would self-destruct. Enemies were often the best teachers. Fang Yuan had suffered under the influence of Mo Yao's fake will and Giant Sun's special will. How could he not learn from them? Waving his hand, Fang Yuan easily sent Xianxia flying. Everything is over. He walked to Xianxia, looking at the Fang Yuan in front of him. He sighed with complex emotions. Xianxia felt like he was in an icy river. He was chilled to the bones. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1022, It Was All Heaven's Will. Chapter 1022, It Was All Heaven's Will. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Book 5, Demon King's Domination. Everything is over. Looking at Xianxia under his feet, Fang Yuan sighed. After realizing he himself had fallen to a scheme, Xianxia's heart was filled with ice-cold despair. He gave up completely. He knew he was thoroughly defeated and had no chance of turning around the situation. However, a change occurred right at this moment. Bam! A soft explosion erupted. Xianxia's soul, as well as Fang Yuan's immortal zombie body, had instantly self-detonated. The immortal zombie body's Dao marks, as well as Xianxia's soul, turned into fuel for Spring-Autumn Cicada. Spring-Autumn Cicada activated. A light flashed in Fang Yuan's eyes. Spring-Autumn Cicada once again entered the river of time. Fang Yuan was pale with shock. What's going on? What the hell is going on? Spring-Autumn Cicada is filled with my special will. How could it be activated by Xianxia? No. Based on his expression, he already had no more will to resist. How could he activate my Spring-Autumn Cicada? Could it be that he was only acting? Spring-Autumn Cicada is my possession. I took extra precautions with the special will as well. How could it be activated by Xianxia? Fang Yuan was filled with shock and fright, as well as questions. The questions he had puzzled him. Standing on the same spot, Fang Yuan did not move, like a stone statue. The change had occurred too suddenly. Soon, his forehead was filled with cold sweat. What to do? What can I do? Fang Yuan had used Spring-Autumn Cicada to turn around many situations, making comebacks and escaping from multiple dangerous scenarios. However, at this moment, facing someone else using Spring-Autumn Cicada, he found that he had no method to deal with it. His time path accumulation was indeed too weak. Without Spring-Autumn Cicada, he almost had no foundation in this aspect. Did I miscalculate? What else is there that I did not consider? Fang Yuan squinted, a drop of cold sweat slipping down from his forehead to his eyes, and then down across his face. Unable to find any answers, Fang Yuan shook his head and sighed. Nothing can be done about it, I already did my utmost. If Fang Yuan had not switched souls according to Star Constellation Immortal Venerable's instructions, he would have utterly lost, with no chance to make a comeback. He simply could not have reached his current position. Could it be that because I did not follow Star Constellation Immortal Venerable's intention to destroy Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu, this change occurred? Spring-Autumn Cicada has not recovered, its activation now can only result in death. No, that's not right. Fang Yuan suddenly thought of a remaining arrangement created by Shadow Sect. That was the ghost face and the red lotus in the River of Time. In an instant, a chill spread all over his body and his hair stood on end. Be prepared for the worst in every situation. If he succeeds in rebirth, what change will occur on my end? Right as Fang Yuan was thinking, he felt his vision starting to turn blurry. No, it was not his vision turning blurry. It was the whole world turning blurry under the strength of time path. Because of Ying Wu Xie's rebirth, everything was changing. Whoosh! Ying Wu Xie quickly reacted, exclaiming in shock, This is the River of Time. How could this be? How did the Spring-Autumn Cicada activate? How can my consciousness replace Fang Yuan's consciousness in the Spring-Autumn Cicada? He had no fewer questions than Fang Yuan. Although he was the person concerned, he had reached the River of Time without knowing anything about how it happened. In the River of Time, waves surged. A huge wave ruthlessly crashed toward Spring-Autumn Cicada. Ying Wu Xie's will immediately became panicked, screaming in fear. Spring-Autumn Cicada was extremely weak, if it was struck by this wave, it had no possibility of surviving. Sigh, so it was like this. A sigh emerged during this moment of crisis. From the River of Time floated out a ghost face. Its expression was bitter as it opened its mouth wide and spat out a red lotus. The red lotus opened up and obstructed the fatal wave. Afterwards, a formless suction force carried Spring-Autumn Cicada, which contained Ying Wu Xie's will, to the center of the red lotus. In an instant, Ying Wu Xie's will had entered a dark red space. In this space, another will in Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's appearance was sitting cross-legged in mid-air, smiling bitterly at him. Our main body actually left you behind as a last resort in the River of Time. Ying Wu Xie's will was stunned for a moment before he immediately asked joyfully. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's will nodded, then shook his head, You can also be considered a split soul of the main body, you should have remembered me. But unfortunately, because of the pure dream reality seeker physique, your memories dissipated. Sigh. Nothing can be done about it, you think I was willing. Ying Wu Xie was extremely anxious, also, what is going on? I had been schemed against by Fang Yuan and landed in his hands, I thought my death was certain. Why would I appear in the River of Time? Also, I clearly did not use Spring-Autumn Cicada, so why did it suddenly activate? Spectral Soul Demon Venerables will heaved a long sigh, I watched the whole series of events from inside this Red Lotus True Inheritance, and just came to a realization. You could enter here because Heaven's will helped you. Spring-Autumn Cicada was also activated by Heaven's will. What? Ying Wu Xie almost collapsed from shock. This was beyond his wildest imagination. If it were not the genuine will of Spectral Soul in front of him, Ying Wu Xie would absolutely not have believed this fact. Hasn't Heaven's will always been making difficulties for us? How could it suddenly help us? Ying Wu Xie asked. Your memories have already completely dissipated, you lack my knowledge. Heaven's will never made things difficult for us out of dislike. It also never helped us out of pity. The way of heaven is to be impartial, it is to take away surpluses while replenishing deficits. So all things are in balance and mutually restrict each other. As such, almost all fierce beasts have their natural enemies, and even rank 9 venerables have limited lifespan. Spectral soul demon venerables will pause for a moment before continuing, and the way of humans is exactly the opposite of the way of heaven, it is to reduce the deficits and build up the surpluses. An expert will want to become even stronger. The rich would want to become richer. A beauty would want to become more beautiful. Those who have found longevity will want to obtain eternal life. Human avarice knows no bound, it will never be satisfied and is opposed to heaven's will. I understand a little now. Heavens will help me because I failed. Fang Yuan has become a complete otherworldly demon and has already broken free of restrictions. If he is left unchecked, it will greatly damage the balance of heaven and earth. So heavens will shifted its target and wants to use me to deal with him and not let his plan succeed. But how could heavens will activate spring-autumn cicada? This immortal Gu is clearly refined by Fang Yuan. Xianxia was puzzled about this. Spectral soul demon venerables will replied, sigh. This is an action by heaven's will. I also realized it just earlier. When Fang Yuan obtained spring-autumn cicada, it was all arranged by heaven's will. Heaven's will had already chosen him as a tool, letting him rebirth and destroy our main body's plan. Now that I think about the information given by Ningbing earlier, a place where Fang Yuan performed particularly out of the ordinary was at Qin Mao Mountain. Although his aptitude was not good, his path had been smooth sailing, and at every urgent moment, he would make the wisest choice, obtaining the greatest benefits. Qin Mao Mountain, Three Kings Blessed Land, Imperial Court Blessed Land, Tian Mountain, all along the way, he clearly has not used spring-autumn cicada just once. Spring-autumn cicada is only rank 6, it has a failure rate. But he actually succeeded time after time. Besides the previous time where we helped him, he did not fail even once in all his other attempts. And bear in mind that spring-autumn cicada lowers his luck. This is probably all because heaven's will was helping him in secret, which allowed him to rise from a mortal to a Gu immortal in a handful of years, causing him to draw the attention of our main body and be chosen as a tool to deal with heaven's will. Xianxia was gobsmacked. Wait, you are saying. Spectral souls will nodded, right. This time, our main body failed primarily because of Fang Yuan. Our main body wanted to use Fang Yuan as a tool. But in fact, Fang Yuan was already a tool of heaven's will. Regardless of how many times Fang Yuan underwent rebirth, before his first rebirth, our main body had likely already succeeded. Not only did we refine sovereign immortal fetus Gu, we might have even reached a heaven-defying level. Precisely because of this, heaven's will did not stint on helping Fang Yuan, letting him rebirth and arrive in the past to destroy our main body's plan. Fang Yuan is quite an interesting character. He is an otherworldly demon, so he has the qualifications to rebirth and change the past. Ordinary people, no matter how superior they are, cannot escape the decree of fate. However, he is not a complete otherworldly demon, so he could still be influenced and manipulated by heaven's will. He thought he was the one to refine spring-autumn cicada and use it, but in fact that was never the case. This trump card, spring-autumn cicada, was already infused with heaven's will. It is clear this arrangement had already started the moment Fang Yuan obtained spring-autumn cicada. But he was deceived by heaven's will and never felt anything wrong. After all, spring-autumn cicada can only carry a portion of will when traveling to the past. And wills are inferior to souls, they can very easily be influenced. It is like right now, I want to impart all my memories and knowledge to you, but unfortunately your will can only bear very little. For a moment, Xianxia's mouth was wide open, unable to say anything. The waves of the river of time unceasingly crashed against the red lotus. Petals scattered along with the waves. Soon, only the innermost center of the flower was remaining. You don't have much time. Spectral soul demon venerables will sighed and continued. Fang Yuan is an otherworldly demon, heavens will try to influence him as much as possible, but in the end, he followed his own mind's inner desires and chose to seize sovereign immortal fetus Gu, instead of destroying it. As such, he is like a chess piece who no longer is restricted by the rules of chess. Heavens will naturally would not tolerate such an existence, so it activated Spring-Autumn Cicada to use you in the process of dealing with Feng Yuan. But Heaven's will is not going to let you regain sovereign immortal fetus Gu after you rebirth. So, after you rebirth, you would likely not have any easy opportunities to change the overall situation. Don't be impatient and ruin this final chance. Xianxia asked, then what should I do? Now, Zombie Alliance is already annihilated, Shadow Sect is also destroyed, even my main body is in a dangerous situation. But Shadow Sect's immortals have all left behind some arrangements for the future. You can use these to re-establish Shadow Sect. Fate is hard to defy, but luck can be exploited. The power from Northern Plains Longevity Heaven can be used. On Central Continent side, there are also hidden forces which have not been targeted by the 10 great ancient sects. Your will is limited, knowing this much is already your maximum. Use these to re-establish Shadow Sect and save our main body. Most crucially, you need to inform our main body of this important information. Because when you rebirth, both I and this Red Lotus true inheritance will also change, and I won't remember these things. At that time, you will be the only person who knows. Remember, a tall tree is the first to face destruction, soil that is nearest to the water will be the first to be swept away by the currents. Our previous action of hiding and accumulating power to deal with Heaven's will was correct. Since we succeeded once, then we can succeed a second time. Take care of yourself. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1023, Xianxia Rebirths. Chapter 1023, Xianxia Rebirths. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. The sound of the wind was blowing intensely, as Feng Yuan, who was still flying, jolted to awareness. He blurted out, I was reborn. Spring-Autumn Cicada is amazing indeed. Worthy of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's vital immortal Gu. What time is it now? Xianxia stopped moving. He looked around, realizing that he was on the way to Etian Mountain. At this moment, he was less than 10,000 li away from his destination. Feng Yuan purposely lent me fixed immortal travel so that I could get to him. He would then take his Gu worms back and obtain victory. But he did not expect that he was Heaven's will's tool to begin with. The Spring-Autumn Cicada that he had was controlled by Heaven's will all along. Now that I have been reborn, I know the appearance of Etian Mountain scenery clearly. I can use fixed immortal travel to teleport there directly. I can deal with Feng Yuan and take revenge. Thinking of this, Xianxia shook his head rapidly. Damn it! Feng Yuan's fake will affected my judgment again. Xianxia gritted his teeth. Heaven's will truly has ill intentions. Even if I rush over now, Feng Yuan has already used sovereign immortal fetus Gu. He is weakened at most. All I can do is injure him. What a pity. If I return to the time when I just escaped from the dream realm, I would be able to turn this around. Humph, but Heaven's will would not allow that. It does not want to see my main body obtain sovereign immortal fetus Gu. Since the outcome is already decided, I should follow the instructions of my main body and retreat. Heaven's will wants us to fight. How can I let its scheme succeed? Anyone who can achieve great things must be able to endure the most unbearable things. I do not need to deal with Feng Yuan. He can draw the attention of Heaven's will. In the future, if he is still alive, I will use him as the material to refine sovereign immortal fetus Gu again. I can save a lot of time and effort in that case. I need to rebuild Shadow Sect. This is definitely not the end. I can make use of Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lulan, but I cannot let them meet Feng Yuan. Since he knew about the fake will, he was on guard against it. Xianxia escaped from Feng Yuan's scheme. He took a final look at Etian Mountain. Anger, hatred, and anticipation were flickering in his eyes. At this distance, he could see that Etian Mountain was in rubble. The despicable thief Feng Yuan, the one who took the fruits of his labor, was definitely still there. But he could not go there now. The most important thing was the big picture. Xianxia gritted his teeth, turning around and leaving. Why has Xianxia not come here yet? Fang Yuan waited for a long time, his heart sank to rock bottom. This means he saw through my arrangements and left my control. Fang Yuan was frowning deeper. Although he did not know what happened, he did not know the truth of spring-autumn cicada with the memories of the previous life gone, but Fang Yuan knew one thing clearly: he was in quite a pinch. If Xianxia does not come here, the special will that I placed in my goo worms will not activate. After the time limit, these goo worms will self-detonate. I need to get to Xianxia as soon as possible, suppressing or convincing Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan to subdue him with me. Fang Yuan still had attitude Gu, this was the best evidence to convince He Lu Lan. As for Tai Bai Yunsheng, it was even easier. After spending so much time together, he just needed to reveal some details to convince him. Fang Yuan inspected his goo worms. He had regained control of the goo worms that he brought after using Change Soul. The highest ranking one was the legendary attitude Immortal Gu. Other than that, he had the Wisdom Path Immortal Gu Unravel Mystery, and the Soul Path Immortal Gu Change Soul. As for the others, they were all Dream Path and Soul Path Mortal Gu, they were not worth mentioning. Fang Yuan frowned deeply. Among them, there was no movement-type Gu worm. Do I need to chase after Xianxia, who has fixed immortal travel, on foot? Or maybe I can subdue the Dream Path Gu worms on Xianxia's body first. These Gu worms include movement-type Gu worms. But inside these Gu, there was none of Fang Yuan's will. Thus, Fang Yuan could not subdue them easily like Unravel Mystery and Change Soul. To use them, he might need to use Attitude Gu to deceive them. But he had already deceived them once. Fang Yuan felt little confidence in succeeding a second time. But I have no choice, I must try. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan subconsciously raised his head, looking at Xianxia's body in the sky. He did not expect that this was the last time he was seeing Xianxia's body. At the next moment, Xianxia's body self-destructed. There was no sound. This was a silent explosion. The result of the explosion was not bloody, it was beautiful and dazzling. The entirety of Xianxia's body turned into layers of dazzling lights. These beautiful lights were shining in the colors of the rainbow, they were extremely beautiful. But looking at this beautiful sight, Fang Yuan's pupils shrunk, he quickly retreated, getting some distance from it. Because he recognized this was a dream realm. This dream realm had manifested externally, it was unfathomably deep, forming right in front of him. Did this happen because I used Lead Soul into Dream on Spectral Soul? No, definitely not. All of a sudden, why did Xianxia's body self-detonate? And it turned into a dream realm? Fang Yuan sighed inwardly. He did not know that Xianxia's lifespan was only 18 hours. During the 18 hours, Xianxia turned from a mortal into a rank 1, rank 2, 3, 4, 7, and rank 8 Gu Immortal. Every 2 hours, his cultivation level increased by 1 rank. At the final moment, he would even become a rank 9 Gu Immortal. But once the 18 hours was up, he would self-detonate, turning into a dream realm. He was born from nothing, he was created using Immortal Gu become real, appearing from a dream realm. It was not strange that he turned into a dream realm. The dream realm created from his detonation expanded rapidly, spreading out. Fang Yuan raced away as fast as he could, he fled for 700 li, until he was out of the dream realm's radius. If he was inside the dream realm, he would be in trouble. Even though Fang Yuan had Unravel Mystery Immortal Gu, he did not have enough Mortal Gu to use his Immortal Killer move, Unravel Dream. The dream realm was still spreading, but the speed was decreasing. Fang Yuan could only keep retreating. When he was 1,000 li away from Etian Mountain, the dream realm stopped expanding. In this way, a giant dream realm that stretched 1,000 li after manifestation appeared in front of Fang Yuan, filling his vision. Fang Yuan's heart jumped. Thankfully, I did not listen to Star Constellation Immortal Venerable at the end and destroy Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu. Otherwise, my soul would be trapped along with Xianxia's body in this giant dream realm until my death. What do I do now? This change severely disrupted Fang Yuan's plans. Wu Xie's body was extremely valuable. He had a set of Dream Path Gu worms and could use the formidable lead soul into Dream. What Fang Yuan wanted the most was spectral soul. Even though he was in bad condition, if he escaped the dream realm and ended up in Fang Yuan's hands, Fang Yuan could soul search him and obtain lots of secrets, along with a vast amount of cultivation experience. And this huge battlefield, even though it was ravaged by myriad tribulations, some Gu Immortals' immortal apertures might be left behind, at the least, life and death blessed land was still around. But now, all of these things were covered by the dream realm. Regardless of whether Fang Yuan had unraveled Dream, even if he could use it, how many years would it take him to unravel this dream realm and get to the center of the battlefield? Fang Yuan clenched his fists, looking at the giant dream realm, he sighed helplessly. At this point, there are no other options. I cannot stay here. After such a commotion, southern border Gu Immortals are definitely rushing here. Fang Yuan quickly moved according to his memories. He chose the direction where Tai Bai Yunsheng had escaped with his body. Hopefully, my luck is good and I can encounter them. Fang Yuan was not going to succeed. He did not know that after encountering some southern border Gu Immortals, Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan had already changed directions after the intense battle. He also did not know that using the advantage of rebirth, Wu Xie had joined up with Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan already. Fang Yuan, you had better explain it properly, otherwise, we will be enemies. He Lu Lan's expression was dark, she was very rude towards Wu Xie. Tai Bai Yunsheng quickly waved his hands, calm down. I believe Fang Yuan has his reasons, listen to him. Wu Xie looked at Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan in a sincere manner. I was too anxious, I was hit by his killer move, I did not just end up in the dream realm. Right now, most of my Gu worms cannot be used, only by killing him can this killer move be undone. But I saw you use fixed immortal travel. If not for the fact that our locations can be detected with Gu worms, I thought you were abandoning us and left southern border yourself. He Lu Lan spoke quickly, demanding imposingly. That was a desperate move that I was forced to use. You also saw that I failed and suffered heavy injuries when I used fixed immortal travel the first time. Furthermore, why would I abandon you? The situation now is filled with danger, we have to stay united to have a bigger chance of survival. Wu Xie said convincingly. He Lu Lan snorted, she wanted to continue arguing. But Wu Xie stopped her from speaking, enough. We will use fixed immortal travel to leave now. My identity is already exposed, Heavenly Court knows already, who immortal blessed land is not safe, we have to transfer the resources inside. Fang Yuan sprinted rapidly. He did not use any Gu worms, but he was fast like a charging horse. After 15 minutes of sprinting, he did not feel any fatigue. Along the way, he realized joyfully, this body might look pale and tender, but it had incredible defense. During his sprint, none of the tree branches that scraped his body left a mark. The sharp rocks on the ground were crushed when he stepped on them, they were no obstruction to him. Furthermore, he had huge strength. By just leaping gently, he could jump for 10 meters of distance. But what made Fang Yuan disappointed was, he did not encounter any traces of Wu Xie, Tai Bai Yunsheng, or He Lu Lan wherever he went. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1024, Fang Yuan borrows Gu. Chapter 1024, Fang Yuan borrows Gu. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Wind blew wildly past him, Fang Yuan traveled across mountains and rivers, even without using Gu worms, his speed was very fast. After he left the range of the tribulations, he no longer saw flat plains, instead, there were mountains and forests. Southern border was full of mountains, this was the special characteristic of the region. After running for so long, without any rest, I felt no fatigue at all. Most importantly, I did not even use a single Gu worm. Fang Yuan was starting to feel the uniqueness of this body now. A Gu master's body, without using Gu worms to modify them like black boar Gu and white boar Gu, was no different to a mortal. Precisely because of the Dao marks in their bodies, Gu masters' bodies become extraordinary, filled with unique specialties. My body was created from the rank 9 sovereign immortal fetus Gu. It seems that the Dao marks in me are not few in number. At the least, the number of strength path Dao marks surpass my previous body's accumulation. Fang Yuan assessed in his mind. After becoming an immortal zombie, he had also stopped feeling physical fatigue. But if his original body revived, he would definitely need to rest if he tried running like this. Fang Yuan ran in the thick forest. He used both his hands and legs to climb cliffs and steep paths. Fang Yuan was still naked, he was like a white figure dashing through the thick forest. He could see the thick forest clearly in his vision. Even during his sprinting, it was as if time was still. Fang Yuan could easily avoid obstacles. Using a phrase from Earth, this is visual acuity. My visual acuity while moving is superb to the extreme. This is definitely inhuman. My original body could only reach this stage after using Gu worm. Rapidly, Fang Yuan ascended to the peak of this mountain. The forest that obscured his vision was gone, his field of vision expanded, he could see everything around him. Wind blew as his long hair swayed behind his back. Fang Yuan took a couple of deep breaths before settling down, his breathing was regular and relaxed, as if the running earlier did not happen. His stamina was unbelievable. Mountain winds blew coldly, Fang Yuan was still naked, without being covered up at all, but he felt no chill. His heartbeat returned to normal, every time it beat, it was very strong and lively. Fang Yuan looked into the distance. His vision was very good. Looking 10,000 steps away, everything was clear to him. Looking around, Fang Yuan's gaze froze, he stared in focus. He saw traces of battle. It seems that Tai Bai Yun Sheng and He Lu Lan carried my body and encountered Gu immortals here, they had a fight. Fang Yuan jumped down from a mountain peak. With a loud bang, he landed on a rock 10 meters below. He was uninjured. Even his legs felt no numbness. The rock below him, however, was covered in spider web-like cracks. Fang Yuan's eyes shined, he began experimenting. The distance between him and the ground increased. From 10 meters to 15 meters, to 25 meters, and to 40 meters. Using examples from Earth, 15 meters was the height of a 5-story building. 40 meters was a tall building, a lighthouse. He was not at his limit yet, the distance increased to 160 meters. At this point, Fang Yuan felt his feet turning numb. His guts were huge, several times, he used other areas of his body to land. His chest hit the ground, his back hit the ground, he was able to create holes in the mountain rocks. Fang Yuan stood up from the holes, completely intact. In fact, the numb feeling felt great. Breathing in deeply, Fang Yuan jumped down again. This time, he was at 180 meters. This height was not a problem for Fang Yuan, but the point was, he was pointing his head downwards. Bam! With a loud sound, Fang Yuan's entire head was buried into the rock. Propping himself up, he pulled his head out of the rock. The skull was the hardest part of the body, but Fang Yuan felt something. His skull was numb, and he felt a little dizzy. But this dizziness only lasted for 3 breaths of time, and it was very mild. With a gust of cool breeze, it was gone. Fang Yuan touched his head and inspected his body. He was completely intact, he did not even lose a single strand of hair. He was good as new. Fang Yuan tried to pull his hair, he found out that his hair was very durable, he had to use a lot of strength to pull out one strand. This hair was thicker than a normal person's hair, it was black and shiny, resembling a thin steel wire. Pulling it further, it did not break, it was extremely durable. Fang Yuan thought it over, he tied this hair around his wrist, turning several rounds before tightening it. This hair could not be lost, if someone with ill intentions took it, it was a useful thing for deductions. Fang Yuan ran towards the area with traces of battle, while jumping down from mountain cliffs and testing his limits. The height continued to increase. From 180 meters, he reached 250 meters. At this point, Fang Yuan felt pain, but it was not unbearable yet. Eventually, after 330 meters, Fang Yuan stopped his experiment. From this height, he could already feel evident pain. The area where he landed on was slightly red, there was a slight bruise. 330 meters is not my body's limit. Fang Yuan was shocked. This height was terrifying. Even the Eiffel Tower on Earth was only 300 meters tall. With just this body, without using a single defensive Gu, I can reach this level. Even Gu immortals, with just their bodies alone, it is not common to reach this level, right? It seems that among the Dao marks that I have, there are a lot of defensive properties. Realizing this, Fang Yuan was more assured. He had no defensive immortal Gu now, he only had unravel mystery, change soul, and attitude Gu. Arriving at the location of the battle traces, Fang Yuan squatted down and investigated. It seems to be them. Soon, Fang Yuan stood up, frowning. Without investigative Gu worms, it was very troublesome. Fang Yuan could not be certain. But he knew that he had to continue chasing them. There is not much time left. He had no time to check his own abilities. The earlier experiment was only due to convenience. Fang Yuan continued pursuing them. Soon, he found the second and third traces of them. Fang Yuan followed these traces and slowly changed his direction. Battles between Gu immortals usually happened in the sky. There were few traces left on the ground. And because Fang Yuan could not fly, it was hard for him to track them. As time passed, Fang Yuan's heart sank to rock bottom. Suddenly, a figure descended from the sky like a comet. With a loud crash, he landed in front of Fang Yuan. Fire spread everywhere, burning all of the surrounding trees. Who is it? Fang Yuan frowned, his eyes shined as he shouted coldly. I am Huakong Dong, did you come from Etian Mountain? The person was burning in flames, his attitude was not friendly. Fang Yuan's expression turned grim, changed soul immortal Gu's aura burst out as he questioned instead of answering. You came at a good time, just now when you were flying, did you see any suspicious individuals? Sensing the aura of changed soul immortal Gu, he knew that Fang Yuan was not to be trifled with. His demeanor changed. The majority of rank 6 Gu immortals did not have immortal Gu. Even though Huakong Dong was a lone cultivator, he had already joined Southern Border's Chai clan. Chai clan was a super force. In this battle of Etian Mountain, Chai clan's Gu immortals died. Chai clan's first supreme elder thus sent an external elder, Gu immortal Huakong Dong, to investigate the cause. Hearing Fang Yuan's question, Huakong Dong thought in his mind, suspicious individuals. You are running around here but naked in broad daylight, you are the most suspicious one. He was silent briefly before answering. There is not a single person within 100 li other than you, sir. Damn it! Damn it! Fang Yuan screamed, his expression was twisted and ruthless, he seemed to be bloodthirsty. Next, he clenched his fists as he gritted his teeth, speaking to himself, it seems they have escaped. But even if you escape to the ends of the world, I will find you. I will return this humiliation to you by 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Huakong Dong saw Fang Yuan like this and had a guess. It seems this person is naked because he was plotted against by someone, he lost many Gu worms and suffered a loss. He has a fierce personality and is furious now, I should be careful. Fang Yuan did not explain anything, but Huakong Dong had already found an explanation for Fang Yuan in his mind. Furthermore, he did not want to provoke Fang Yuan, it was not worth it to deal with his anger. I did not delve deeply into Etian Mountain, go and see for yourself. Saying this, Fang Yuan was ready to leave. Hearing this answer, Huakong Dong was not pleased, he wanted to obstruct Fang Yuan, but Fang Yuan paused in his steps, he asked, wait. You are Huakong Dong. A member of Chai clan? That's right. Huakong Dong stared blankly as he answered. Fang Yuan showed an unsightly smile. Good, I am old friends with your ninth Supreme Elder. Has he completed his battlefield killer move Myriad Flash Fire? Huakong Dong quickly replied, Ninth Elder is still in seclusion. He is forced to stay in by his grandfather. Earlier he tried to harass Fairy Yi. After I settle this matter, I will look for him. Fang Yuan said, stretching out his arm to Huakong Dong, lend me some gu worms. Huakong Dong was shocked. What? You are a grand gu immortal, just lend me some mortal gu, why are you so stingy? Fang Yuan asked impatiently. Huakong Dong thought, Ninth Elder is completing his battlefield killer move, but that is only an excuse to outsiders. The truth is, he did harass Fairy Yi. The other party knows this, he must be friends with him. Even though I joined Chai clan, I am only a lone cultivator and outsider. But Ninth Elder is a member of Chai clan, and the grandson of First Supreme Elder. If I meet his friend and refuse to lend gu worms, he would definitely be unhappy with me. Then I'll lend them. They're mortal gu anyway, they don't cost much. Huakong Dong took out his gu worms, handing them to Fang Yuan, asking, I wonder what is your name, brother? I am Dong Fang Xiongji. Fang Yuan waved his hand. Huakong Dong stared as he thought, he is Dong Fang Xiongji. He is indeed a notorious friend of Ninth Elder, he is famous in southern border for being extremely stingy, moreover he is small-minded and would take revenge for minor grievances. But he doesn't look like this. Oh. He has no clothes left, he could only change his appearance. Never mind, I can forget about getting back these gu worms I lent him. But if I can get this person to leave after lending to him, it would be a blessing. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1025, Dark Night, Cold Winds. Chapter 1025, Dark Night, Cold Winds. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Whoosh. Fang Yuan flew in the sky, like a fireball, his body was burning in flames, a long trail of smoke was behind him, he had quite the striking appearance. The situation earlier was quite dangerous. Fang Yuan met Huakong Dong, even though he had 3 immortal gu, and some soul path and dream path mortal gu, they were not comprehensive, if they fought, he would be at a disadvantage. Even if Fang Yuan wanted to use the immortal killer move and swap souls with Huakong Dong, he could not. Earlier, when swapping souls with Xianxia, he had already expended a lot of mortal gu. All of the gu worms with him could not form a full set to use the killer move. But using his superior acting skills, not only did he alleviate the danger, he scammed 4 rank 5 mortal gu from him. In my previous life, I joined the Battle of Tian Mountain and the huge gambling contest. I witnessed the conflicts between Southern Border's gu immortals and obtained a lot of information. Thanks to this, I was able to learn about the relationship between Chai clan's 9th Elder and Dong Fang Xiongji. I could deceive Huakong Dong just now thanks to Attitude Gu. Even though Fang Yuan had the original familiar face, he modified it with Attitude Gu as the core, using 1,000 mortal gu for the new version. But he could not use this killer move now. Earlier, against Huakong Dong, he had used Attitude Gu solely. Attitude Gu's ability is to conceal my true emotions and show a fake attitude, it can make others believe it. Thinking back, Fang Yuan felt that Attitude Gu was really useful. Because he used Attitude Gu secretly, his acting earlier was flawless, Huakong Dong felt that Fang Yuan was enraged and did not want to provoke him. There was another advantage too, even though Attitude Gu was of high rank, it had a low usage requirement. It only expended mental energy. Fang Yuan had just revived, he had little immortal essence, it was far less than his original accumulation. Unfortunately, Attitude Gu is not mine, I have to return it to He Lu Lan eventually. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan felt it was a great pity. Even though he had revived and obtained a new body, his soul was the same as before, it did not change. Earlier, just after he had reborn, he had set a new alliance agreement with He Lulan and Fairy Lishan. This alliance agreement was very restrictive and did not have any loopholes. It restricted the alliance members in both body and soul. Thus, even though Fang Yuan was in a different body, he could not go against it. But the effect of the alliance agreement should be split into two portions. One is in the soul while the other is in the body. I am only considered half an alliance member. Sigh. Even so, the harm of going against the agreement is too great. Even if it does not affect my body, my soul would not be able to endure it. This body must have quite a lot of wisdom path Dao marks. While he was pondering, Fang Yuan's thoughts shifted as he realized another point. He distinctly remembered, when he had just become an immortal zombie, his mind could not work well. He was like a dying old man whose thinking was very slow. Using wisdom path methods, he managed to overcome this flaw. After obtaining a new body, he could feel his thoughts turning rapidly with just a shift of his mind. Inspiration was bursting out like the water of a fountain. During the process of thinking, thoughts were being produced in larger numbers, like the ripples of waves from the sea. I can finally stop using wisdom path Gu worms to replenish the thoughts in my mind. At this moment, Fang Yuan was about to tear up. In the past, he had to use Gu worms to generate thoughts and think. But now, with a living body, he could produce large numbers of thoughts, and these thoughts varied greatly. There were malicious thoughts, kind thoughts, longing thoughts, empty thoughts, battle thoughts, evil thoughts, obsessed thoughts. As long as a person is alive, there would be a great variety of thoughts in their mind. This is not strange. But my speed of producing thoughts is much faster than normal. I could sustain even the rate of consumption under the light of wisdom for a long time. Precisely because of this, Fang Yuan predicted that this body had a significant number of wisdom path Dao marks. As to how many, he could not estimate the numbers yet. The clarity of his cognition was unprecedented. Even his former body, before becoming an immortal zombie, was far inferior. Other than wisdom path Dao marks, I also have quite a number of fire path Dao marks. Fang Yuan looked at the flames on his body as bright light flashed in his eyes. The clothing of fire he was wearing was the rank 5 fire cape Gu. Once used, it would cause the body to burn in flames. They were harmless but had an elaborate effect, showing an eye-catching appearance. Huakong Dong also used this Gu, but his body was covered in flames that were less than a human finger long. But Fang Yuan's flames not only covered his whole body, they were very long. The height of the flames exceeded the forearm of an adult man. Other than fire cape Gu, Fang Yuan also borrowed a rank 5 flying smoke Gu. Right now, Fang Yuan was flying in the sky. It was due to flying smoke Gu. Behind Fang Yuan, thick black smoke billowed out. Most importantly, his speed was so fast that it exceeded the normal limits of flying smoke Gu. It could match some mortal killer moves. During the process of flying, winds blew wildly as he left the mountains behind. Fang Yuan had an idea in his mind. It seems that not only are there fire path Dao marks, I also have Dao marks suited for flying. He could finally fly. This way, Fang Yuan's flying quasi-grandmaster attainment level could be displayed. Being able to fly meant that he could be very agile in fighting. When humans stood on the ground, they could only move left, right, forward, backward, or jump up and down. But in the sky, they could fly in all directions, evading wherever they wished. This was a qualitative change. His battle strength rose rapidly because of just one Gu worm. Of course, Fang Yuan's current battle strength was still very low among Gu immortals. If he met other southern border Gu immortals, he would need to deceive them using attitude Gu. I should try to avoid battles and catch up to Xianxia. I need to expose his identity and join up with He Lulan and Tai Bai Yunsheng. Fang Yuan planned. Right now, because Tian Mountain was covered by the huge dream realm, Xianxia would not go there. Fang Yuan's special will would not activate if he went there. After the time limit was up, Fang Yuan's Gu worms would self-detonate. But as long as Fang Yuan controlled the situation, it could still be resolved. That was to use He Lulan and Tai Bai Yunsheng's help to collect Gu worms and swap souls again. After using Change Soul, Fang Yuan would return to his original body and mobilize his Gu worms, extracting the special will from them. There is a need to explain the relationship between souls, bodies, and thoughts here. With just a body, thoughts could not be produced, the body only provided the mind. The soul produces thoughts, but they could not last, the mind was needed to store them and cause collisions to result in thinking. When Gu masters manipulate Gu worms, normally speaking, they were using thoughts to control them. Wu Xie's soul would produce different thoughts from Feng Yuan's. Thus, he could not use Feng Yuan's Gu worms. Time was pressing, Feng Yuan needed to hurry. Being able to fly expanded his field of vision. It was immensely better than searching on foot. Along the way, he saw many traces of fighting. Gu immortals usually fought in the sky, this was a trait that separated them from Gu masters. Gu immortals had Gu worms and time to train their flying abilities. But Gu masters normally could not. Thus, though these traces were all left behind during battle, there was little obvious damage to the terrain. Luckily, southern border had a lot of mountains, if this was northern plains with linear terrain, the traces would be fainter. If it was eastern sea or western desert, the signs would be even more faint. But despite this, Feng Yuan could not catch his target. As the sky turned dark, his heart sank. Sigh. He exhaled at the sky, he gave up on chasing them, he changed his mind and left, rapidly retreating. Feng Yuan was taking a huge risk in searching for them. Tian Mountain was already a troublesome place to be nearby. Spectral soul refined Gu and went through tribulation, many southern border Gu immortals died, the matter had escalated so much that more southern border Gu immortals were sure to investigate the area. Wu Xia and the others encountered some of these southern border Gu immortals who came to investigate. Feng Yuan met Huakong Dong, but he was only one of them. The difference between the two situations was, the former were northern plains Gu immortals, they were regarded with antagonism by southern border Gu immortals. Feng Yuan had a southern border Gu immortal aura, he did not attract excessive suspicion. But if he continued to stay, even if Feng Yuan had attitude Gu, it was not safe. I left a lot of fake will in my mind, but Wu Xia did not chase after me. Was it because of the obstruction of these southern border Gu immortals? Or did he find out my arrangement? Or were there some hidden details? Feng Yuan guessed. The huge force of Shadow Sect and Spectral Soul Demon Venerables, tens of thousands of years of planning, there are surely arrangements left behind. Even just Zombie Alliance's branches in the 5 regions are already a huge asset. Would Wu Xia go to them? In the worst case scenario, if he uses my identity to take over my assets, how can I deal with it? Dang Hun Mountain and Luo Pa Valley were once used by Spectral Soul Demon Venerable to cultivate, they are in Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land respectively. Even if Wu Xia does not know the scenery of Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land, he can directly teleport to Dang Hun Mountain and Luo Pa Valley using fixed immortal travel, right? Even after swapping souls, the land spirit should be able to detect the difference. But there are many ways to deceive land spirits, and the enemy is Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's split soul. Feng Yuan gradually stopped flying, he floated in the air. Cold wind continued to blow, his mind seemingly was being chilled. The night became darker, Feng Yuan's face also had a deep layer of gloominess. Where did Wu Xia, Tai Bai Yunsheng, and He Lu Lan go exactly? Fixed immortal travel. Jade green light dissipated, Wu Xia left southern border, returning to central continent. Master. Before he looked around, a meek voice could be heard. It is me. Wu Xia raised his head, replying nonchalantly. Looking around, his lips curled into a smile. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1026, given to Feng Jin Huang. Chapter 1026, given to Feng Jin Huang. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Master, please speak the secret code. That timid voice spoke again. Wu Xia spoke, heaven has 9 layers. That voice continued, the land has 5 regions. Wu Xia spoke, throughout the ages. The voice continued, ruling over all beings. With a loud sound, 2 knees landed on the ground, and a sobbing voice could be heard. Nu pays respects to master. Stand up. Xianxia laughed, raising his hand as a signal to the kneeling Rockman Gu immortal. The Rockman Gu immortal kowtowed 3 times before respectfully standing up. However, facing Xianxia, his hands were still dropped, his legs were closed tightly and his body was still in a half-bowing posture, his eyes only gazing at Xianxia's feet, not daring to look straight into Xianxia's eyes. The Gu immortal aura from him was strong, at rank 7 level. Xianxia used fixed immortal travel, but did not go straight to Hu immortal blessed land and seize Dang Hun mountain. Instead, he arrived at this secret base of Shadow Sect in Central Continent. Xianxia's soul was a split soul of spectral soul demon venerable. Previously, his childlike frankness and lack of sophistication were because of the pure dream reality seeker physique erasing the soul's memories. With his memories erased, Xianxia was like a newborn, he would naturally have limited shrewdness. But the battle on the edge of life and death tempered his character, and going through the imparting of spectral souls will in the Red Lotus true inheritance, Xianxia's memories had already recovered to some degree, and was much more mature and steady when handling matters. He had experienced rebirth and thus already knew Feng Yuan's arrangements. Not only could he not use any Gu worms on his body, Feng Yuan's fake will was in his mind, and slight carelessness would have his thoughts influenced. He had an extremely large number of Gu worms, as well as a dazzling array of immortal Gu, but Xianxia could only use fixed immortal travel. In such a situation, he naturally would not stupidly run to Hu immortal blessed land. Even if he had ways to deceive the land spirit, he still required many Gu worms to put them to use. If he entered Hu immortal blessed land without any preparations, he would definitely be found out by the land spirit and that would be truly troublesome. Thus, Xianxia used fixed immortal travel to first arrive at this place and make preparations. First take me to the underground core. Xianxia instructed. Yes, master. Gu immortal Nu quickly responded. The 2 drilled into the ground, going through many twisting dark tunnels and arrived before an underground chamber. This chamber was extremely large, spanning as far as the eye could see. The yellowish-brown soil in the chamber was extremely dense and thick, constantly rolling around. In the periphery of the chamber were layers and layers of Gu formations, for healing, concealing, supporting and other uses. Xianxia fixed his eyes upon a spot, vaguely seeing a sphere made of a soul in the center of the soil, sinking and rising. He observed it for a while, letting out a sigh. This soul sphere was Bo Qing's soul. Back then, Sword Immortal Bo Qing failed in passing his tribulation and was barely saved by Shadow Sect's split soul, Yellow. Thousands of years had gone by but the injuries to Bo Qing's soul were instead worsening. Not only did it not recover, it was reduced to this soul sphere. Bo Qing's soul was struck by the myriad tribulation, water path Dao marks lingered around him, constantly generating without pause. Although it was inhibited by the dense earth path Dao marks in the underground core, it was temporary relief that could only delay for some time and not cure it. Even with Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's foundation, they were at a loss on what to do. However, Shadow Sect had never given up. To look over this area, Shadow Sect subdued a group of rock men. After some nurturing, they raised a Rockman Gu immortal. This Rockman Gu immortal was Nu. Originally, Spectral Soul Demon Venerable had planned and conspired for tens of thousands of years to refine Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu. Although Nu was only rank 7, he was also a considerable battle strength. Unfortunately, when they were about to summon him, an unexpected mishap occurred here. A wild one-eyed giant ape appeared. Nu had no choice but to come out and fight the giant ape and draw it away. Back then, Heaven Overseeing Tower had already set the situation. Shadow Sect was already busy dealing with this and thus did not summon Nu. As such, Gu Immortal Nu had luckily survived. Actually, there were many unexpected incidents occurring in all aspects related to Shadow Sect. Apart from Nu, the most clear example was Qin Bai Sheng running into Feng Jiu Gu. Spectral Soul Demon Venerable wanted to refine Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu, desiring to go against Heaven. Heaven's will would naturally see to stop it. If Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was an otherworldly demon, the situation would be somewhat better. Unfortunately, he was a native of this world and was extremely restricted by Heaven's will. Shadow Sect's strength was absolutely not small, and it was spread over 5 regions. But because of Heaven's will's obstruction, they were not able to use all their strength. After Spectral Soul Demon Venerable was defeated, Shadow Sect dispersed. In particular, their subordinate organization, Zombie Alliance, was completely annihilated. But in the 5 regions, they still had some remaining arrangements. Like Gu Immortal sure knew. After half an hour. Where is this? Tai Bai Yun Sheng came out of Ing Wu Xie's immortal aperture. It is not Hu Immortal Blessed Land. He Lu Lan also came out of Ing Wu Xie's immortal aperture shortly afterwards. The two gazed at their surroundings in doubt. They found they were in an underground room. The arrangement here was extremely crude. The two used investigative goo worms and immediately found this underground room was only a small portion of an entire underground maze. This is the underground environment of rock men. So this is below the ground. Tai Bai Yun Sheng had a slight realization. Ing Wu Xie nodded, right. We have already returned to Central Continent. Right now, we are in Earth Abyss. The rock men here have already been transferred out. This is a secret base arranged by Master. No wonder you put star form Blessed Land in Earth Abyss. So Master had already arranged a location in Earth Abyss. Tai Bai Yun Sheng smiled. So Fong Yuan's second Blessed Land is also in Earth Abyss. Ing Wu Xie mentally noted it down. Purple Mountain True Monarch. He Lu Lan's mind shook as she narrowed her eyes, staring at Ing Wu Xie and asking, why did you not go directly to Hu Immortal Blessed Land? Ing Wu Xie was already prepared, replying calmly, it is not that I don't want to return. But my identity is exposed now. Heavenly Court's Gu Immortals know about me. Although their speed in returning to Central Continent can't match fixed immortal travel, don't forget that they have information path methods. They can notify the 10 great ancient sects to surround Hu Immortal Blessed Land. Such a simple matter, they definitely have already done it. If we directly return there, we might just be sending ourselves into a trap. So I first moved here to scout for intelligence. Then what did you find out? He Lu Lan asked. Ing Wu Xie sighed, it is like I expected, my identity has been exposed. Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects already know that we are the true culprits of the destruction of 88 True Yang Building. Hu Immortal Blessed Land is already surrounded, and they will attack the Blessed Land any moment now. Tai Bai Yun Sheng was greatly shocked. Dang Hun Mountain is still there, what should we do? Tai Bai Yun Sheng knew Fong Yuan had already found a revival method. As such, Hu Immortal Blessed Land's value had greatly reduced. What was more important were the cultivation resources in the Blessed Land. Dang Hun Mountain was extremely important, they had an inexhaustible source of income with it. Ing Wu Xie sneered, Hu Immortal Blessed Land is lost. I will let the 10 great ancient sects safeguard the resources inside for a while. Sooner or later, I will take them back. The urgent thing is to make preparations and recover. Ing Wu Xie suddenly stopped speaking, his face revealing a shocked and startled expression. What happened? Tai Bai Yun Sheng quickly asked. A furious look flashed past Ing Wu Xie's eyes, before he bitterly smiled and brought out Fixed Immortal Travel's destroyed body. I was struck by Shadow Sect's moves, but forcibly activated Fixed Immortal Travel. Now, it is destroyed. This? For a moment, Tai Bai Yun Sheng and He Lu Lan both felt deeply regretful. Fixed Immortal Travel was extremely practical. Now that it was dead, the 3 immortals all felt great loss. Ing Wu Xie was extremely furious inwardly. How could Fixed Immortal Travel self-destruct all of a sudden? It seems Fong Yuan left behind some methods. Damn it! He not only schemed against me, he intentionally let me use Fixed Immortal Travel to try to lure me into going to Tian Mountain. Moreover, he still left behind this method. Since Fixed Immortal Travel could self-destruct, then the same should also apply to Fong Yuan's other goo worms. Thinking of this, Ing Wu Xie was immediately unable to stand by. He now had to think of ways to subdue these goo worms of Fong Yuan. Fong Yuan's arrangement had truly caught him unprepared. Special will, it should be the special will. Looks like I need to race against time, I need to borrow immortal Gu to suppress his Gu worms. I can't let them self-destruct as well. Wu Xie screamed internally, unable to conceal his anxiousness on the surface. Tai Bai Yunxing felt something amiss and asked in concern, Fang Yuan, what's wrong? Wu Xie's face was very gloomy, we have huge trouble. I must quickly deal with it, otherwise my other Gu worms will also have the same ending as fixed immortal travel. What? Is there anything I can help you with? Tai Bai Yunxing immediately felt like his heart was burning, he also felt anxious. You two rest and recuperate first, you will be led to your rooms by the rock men in a while. Humph, I can deal with this situation. After all, Master has not only left behind this stronghold, we still have our network. Wu Xie finished speaking, and then left. Meanwhile in Central Continent, Tian Ti Mountain. We have broken through. We have broken through. Ha ha ha, Hu immortal blessed land has finally been captured by us. Let me see what benefits this kid Fang Yuan had gotten. Be patient, don't forget Dang Hun Mountain will be managed in turns by us, the 10 great ancient sections. Gu immortals of the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent flocked inside, excitedly storming their way into Hu immortal blessed land. Afterwards, it was like their whole bodies were drenched in cold water. Empty, how could it be empty? There is nothing here, what's going on? Where is Dang Hun Mountain? Where did Dang Hun Mountain go? Central Continent's Gu immortals shouted one after the other. You are Lord Feng Jiu Gu. Hu immortal land spirit appeared in front of Feng Jiu Gu and looked at him with her large watery eyes. Feng Jiu Gu was slightly taken aback, I am. My master instructed me to tell Lord that he has already taken everything he needs. As for this blessed land, it shall be given to Lord's daughter, Feng Jin Huan. Hu immortal land spirit said openly. What? Fang Yuan was faster than us. Didn't our combined deductions say he was still in southern border? Why did Fang Yuan hand over Hu immortal blessed land to Feng Jin Huan? Could it be that the two of them? Speaking of it, ever since the Refinement Path Convention, these two have been pretty close. Everyone in the 10 sects know of this. The Gu immortals mumbled. Feng Jiu Ji's gaze swept past them and these whispers immediately stopped. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1027, 9-5 Sovereign Immortal Aperture, 1/2. Chapter 1027, 9-5 Sovereign Immortal Aperture, 1/2. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Going back a while ago in time. Fang Yuan chased Wu Xie with no results, he stopped in the air, feeling dejected. Darkness was becoming deeper as it enshrouded the land. This was a cold night. Wind blew eerily, as Fang Yuan felt a chill in his mind. His original plan was great. Making arrangements in his body, leaving behind fake will and special will, lending fixed immortal travel, according to Fang Yuan's estimations, this plan was very likely to succeed. But the result in reality was failure. Fang Yuan did not know that he had succeeded once, but because of heaven's will and spring-autumn cicada, it all fell apart. Even though he lost, Fang Yuan decided to face the results without denying or trying to make excuses. In fact, he was mentally prepared. This was his mental fortitude created after hundreds of years in this world. Any plan, no matter how detailed, had a possibility of failure. Even Shadow Sect and Spectral Soul's plan over tens of thousands of years, after so many deductions, didn't it still fail? Even the former demon Venerable failed, not to mention Fang Yuan. In this world, no matter who it was, there was no one who would never fail. Fang Yuan attempted to guess Wu Xie's situation. The most likely scenario was that right now, because of the obstruction of southern border Gu immortals, Wu Xie could not go to Tian Mountain. If that was the case, Fang Yuan's arrangements were still in place, and Wu Xie had not discovered them. This was not the worst situation. Perhaps if Fang Yuan continued chasing them, he might get back all his Gu worms and regain his peak battle strength again. But this was only one possibility. Fang Yuan had a vigilant nature. He considered defeat before thinking about victory. He preferred to make the worst possible assumptions and prepare against them. Then, what would be the worst situation? Fang Yuan floated in the night sky, asking himself. The worst-case scenario was if Wu Xie found out his arrangements and exploited them to his benefit, deceiving Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan, going to Star Form Blessed Land or Hu Immortal Blessed Land and taking all of his assets. This was very possible. From Fang Yuan's perspective, Wu Xie was Spectral Soul's split soul. His foundation was very abundant. It may not be hard to detect this arrangement. The most important thing was, Tian Mountain had manifested a gigantic dream realm. The dream realm was the greatest obstacle. Wu Xie could not return to Tian Mountain. Spectral Soul's main body had already fallen deep into the dream realm. Wu Xie definitely wanted to rescue his main body, but he had too few Dream Path Gu worms. In his previous body, there were a number of Dream Path Immortal Gu and Mortal Gu, but after the body detonated, it was unknown whether these Gu worms still existed. Gu worms were very fragile. Even Immortal Gu could be destroyed by a child's fingers. Even if these Dream Path Gu worms were still alive, the dream realm was way too big. In his current state, Wu Xie could not enter the dream realm and take these Gu worms back. Fang Yuan did not have a mentality of leaving things to chance. He stopped chasing them and landed on a nearby mountain. There were many mountains in southern border, with many forests on these mountains. Fang Yuan was leaning against a huge pine tree. He sat on a thick branch as he calmed his mind, using connecting heaven Gu. He had borrowed 4 rank 5 mortal Gu from Huakong Dong. One was Flying Smoke Gu, one was Fire Cape Gu. The other 2 were Connecting Heaven Gu and Divine Sense Gu. The latter 2 were necessities to Gu immortals. Using these 2 Gu worms, they could connect to Treasure Yellow Heaven. It was the biggest market for Gu immortals across the 5 regions. It was not suspicious that Fang Yuan sought these Gu worms from Huakong Dong. If he had them in the first place, he could buy some appropriate Gu worms in Treasure Yellow Heaven. He would not need to run around naked. But he could not ask for more. Even if Fang Yuan had attitude Gu, and Huakong Dong would not suspect his identity, the latter would think that he was taking advantage of him. Fang Yuan had inspected these 4 Gu worms before he carefully used them. There was no issue with Connecting Heaven Gu, but when Fang Yuan was about to use it, his body shook. He showed an expression of immense shock. With his mental fortitude, he could already completely conceal his emotions. But at this moment, his shock was so great, it was unprecedented in his entire life after rebirth. Even when he learned that the mastermind of Shadow Sect was Spectral Soul, Fang Yuan had never been so shocked before. His body and mind were trembling. His mind was quaking incessantly. He was staring with wide-opened eyes, looking at the night sky and lush leaves. He appeared like he was in a daze. Calm down. Fang Yuan blinked, telling himself, but his breathing was rough, his heart was beating rapidly. He sent his consciousness into his immortal aperture again. At the second glance, Fang Yuan observed his brand new immortal aperture again. Immense shock. He frowned, his entire body tensed. An unbelievable immortal aperture was presented to him. What sort of amazing immortal aperture was this? If I did not witness this personally, I would never believe that such an immortal aperture exists in the world. Fang Yuan was filled with this thought. In fact, he had already been mentally prepared. Spectral Soul had spent tens of thousands of years and used up almost all of Shadow Sect's assets. What was it for? It was to refine this rank 9 sovereign immortal fetus Gu. Looking over the entire refinement process, they first used the 10 extreme immortal zombies to create the 10 extreme immortal zombie lifeless formation. They next used the bodies and immortal apertures of countless southern border Gu immortals who died as Gu refinement material. They next sent the members of Zombie Alliance, over 100 immortal zombies, into the formation. Finally, the demon venerable did not stint on sacrifices to himself to activate the 10 extreme formation. Finally, using the countless grand tribulations and myriad tribulations, this grand feat was achieved. The difficulty of each of these steps was unimaginable for rank 8 Gu immortals. Just the first step, to collect all 10 of the 10 extreme physiques, it was very difficult. Tens of thousands of years of planning and waiting, along with some luck, were needed to do this. Not to mention the rest of the steps. After spending such a great sum and sacrificing so much, a rank 9 immortal Gu was formed eventually. Even if Fang Yuan did not know the inside details, he knew that this sovereign immortal fetus Gu had extraordinary power. Rank 9 immortal Gu, in the vast numbers of Gu worms, had the same status as rank 9 venerables. They were extremely rare, extremely precious, and extremely powerful. Fang Yuan had interacted with a rank 9 immortal Gu before. That was Wisdom Gu. Facing Wisdom Gu, he did not even have the ability to refine it. He could only use the light of wisdom. It was like seeing a luxurious meal, but he could only smell it. Even so, the smell was so amazing and brought Fang Yuan immense benefits. Without the light of wisdom, Fang Yuan could not progress so rapidly and fiercely to this extent. He recently encountered his second rank 9 immortal Gu. Sovereign immortal fetus Gu. This time, not only did he smell it, he swallowed this supreme meal whole. Spectral soul refined sovereign immortal fetus Gu, it is definitely not so simple, there are profound mysteries behind it. After rebirth, this idea was lingering in Fang Yuan's mind. But he was chasing after Ing Wuxia, he had no time to explore the mysteries of this body. Fang Yuan's new body was formed by sovereign immortal fetus Gu. Even though there were huge mysteries behind it, there was no rush. The urgent matter was to catch Ing Wuxia and take back his Gu worms. Thus, Fang Yuan threw this matter to the back of his mind. But now, he failed to catch Ing Wuxia, he had to make a response to the worst-case scenario, thus he wanted to use connecting heaven Gu to enter treasure yellow heaven. At this moment, he looked into the immortal aperture for the first time. With just one glance, he was extremely stunned. Because the scenery of this immortal aperture was not normal, it had greatly exceeded Fang Yuan's common sense in regards to cultivation, that had been accumulated over hundreds of years. This immortal aperture was a rank 6 Gu immortal blessed land, but the space was huge, extremely huge. To what extent? Most rank 6 Gu immortals had medium or low-grade blessed lands. A low-grade blessed land had a size of 2,000 square kilometers at the maximum, while a medium-grade blessed land could have a size of 2,700 square kilometers to 4,000 square kilometers. This was the case for most rank 6 Gu immortals. A smaller number of rank 6 Gu immortals, who were like Tai by Yunsheng, had an impressive inheritance and had abundant foundation when ascending to immortal, they would obtain a high-grade blessed land. High-grade blessed lands were formed with a size of 4,700 square kilometers to 6,000 square kilometers. High, medium and low-grade blessed lands were the cases for most rank 6 Gu immortals. Most, because there were exceptions. The 10 extreme physiques. Great strength true martial physique, northern dark ice soul physique, verdant great sun physique, desolate ancient moon physique. Once a person of the 10 extreme physiques became a Gu immortal, like He Lu Lan, they would obtain a super-grade blessed land. Super-grade blessed lands had a territory of over 6,700 square kilometers but did not exceed 13,000 square kilometers. The above information refers to the starting size after immortal ascension. Super-grade blessed lands were very rare. Because the 10 extreme physiques were already rare to begin with, and most of them would die along the way, there were few who could become immortals. Of course, once a 10 extreme immortal came into being, just the space of the immortal aperture was a huge asset for them. Bigger immortal apertures were better, because the larger they were, the more space path Dao marks they had, and the more they could carry. The production of resources and limits on their growth would be higher as well. Many Gu immortals encounter a problem when they cultivate. Their immortal aperture did not have enough space. Their beast groups were too big, they had to sell some. The variant humans were too large in number, they needed to sell slaves. There were too many flowers and grass inside, they had to get rid of some. Everyone knew that the larger the beast groups, the more young they would produce. Everyone knew that the larger the number of variant humans, the more they would reproduce. Everyone knew that their plants were more valuable when they were allowed to grow and expand further. But they had no choice. The size of the immortal aperture was the limitation. Thus, many Gu immortals tried all ways possible to increase the sizes of their immortal apertures. For example, Expand Space Immortal Gu could increase the number of space path Dao marks in the immortal aperture. It was one of the ways to increase the space inside of the immortal aperture. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know in report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1028, 9.5 Sovereign Immortal Aperture, 2 halves. Chapter 1028, 9.5 Sovereign Immortal Aperture, 2 halves. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. However, methods like Expand Space Immortal Gu were only icing on the cake. No matter what methods were used, the biggest factor in determining the limit of the size of the blessed land was still its grade. Looking at Fang Yuan's immortal aperture again. Every layer of his immortal aperture had over 33,500 square kilometers of space. 33,500 square kilometers already exceeded the super-grade blessed land of a 10 extreme physique Gu immortal vastly. And this was just one layer. Fang Yuan found that his immortal aperture had 10 layers. And each layer had more than 33,500 square kilometers of space. Adding them up, 10 layers amounted to over 335,000 square kilometers of space. What did that imply? Fang Yuan could not imagine. Because he had never heard of such a ridiculous immortal aperture in the world. The large space inside was only the first point. Fang Yuan's immortal aperture was split into 10 layers. This was very unique. Normal blessed lands would not have separate spaces, they only had one unified area. For example, Hu immortal blessed land and star form blessed land. When would the space inside the immortal aperture split up? It was when immortal apertures become grotto heavens. By then, the immortal aperture would undergo changes according to the Gu immortal's body, creating many different areas and segments. Starry Sky Grotto Heaven was a prime example. My blessed land has the characteristics of a grotto heaven. Even what may be the greatest blessed land in the world, Xianxia blessed land, only has one unified space. And Xianxia blessed land has fallen from a grotto heaven, while my blessed land has just started at rank 6. And in this first layer, it is split into 5 areas. Fang Yuan's immortal aperture had 10 layers. The first layer was a vast piece of land, split into 5 areas. The second to 10th layers had no soil or earth, they were empty. What made Fang Yuan surprised was that the 5 areas in the first layer were divided very clearly. The central area had the most fertile soil and differences in terrain within. The southern area had many mountains and peaks, it was moist and foggy. The northern area had huge grasslands with strong winds. The eastern area was a sea with countless islands, like a huge chessboard. The western area was desolate and had high temperatures, it was mainly a desert. This arrangement, isn't it the 5 regions of this world? Southern border, eastern sea, central continent, northern plains, western desert. Fang Yuan mumbled internally. What shocked him were the second to 10th layers. In these 9 layers, there was no soil, there was nothing, but they were all colored red, orange, yellow, green, azure, blue, purple, white, and black respectively. Aren't the immemorial 9 heavens arranged with these colors as well? But later, Renzu and his 10 children caused 7 of the heavens to collapse, resulting in the fragment worlds of the immemorial 7 heavens to scatter and fall. Right now, only white and black heaven are left. 9 heavens, 5 regions, 9-5, sovereign. So this is why it is called Sovereign Immortal Fetus Gu. In fact, Fang Yuan had some expectations that his immortal aperture would be different from others, that it would be very exemplary. But he did not expect it to be so impressive. Impressive to the point that Fang Yuan felt a little fearful. Fearful. This emotion seemed hard to understand. But to make a comparison. Tai Bai Yunsheng was an elite person. He Lu Lan was a 10 extreme immortal, a genius among elites. And what was Fang Yuan? He was far beyond any genius. If he had to be described in one word, that would be, monster. Towards geniuses, people would feel admiration, envy or resentment towards them. As for monsters, freaks who went far beyond common sense, people would feel fear, and the urge to eliminate them. In the 500 years of Fang Yuan's previous life, his aperture was only high grade. After rebirth, his strength path immortal aperture was only medium grade. He had worked hard for the goal of attaining super grade. But suddenly, he obtained this immortal aperture. All of a sudden, he had turned from an ordinary Gu immortal to a ridiculous and freakish monster. Naturally, he felt some fear. I cannot let news of this immortal aperture be exposed. Once it is exposed, I will face an endless wave of enemies who wants me dead. But even if I told people about this immortal aperture, nobody would believe me. No, at least, Spectral Soul would believe it. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan's expression turned grim. The better the 9-5 sovereign immortal aperture was, the deeper the enmity between Fang Yuan and Spectral Soul, along with Shadow Sect. Even though Fang Yuan had not uncovered the mysteries of the sovereign immortal aperture yet, on the surface, with just these traits, his relationship with Spectral Soul and Shadow Sect was already irreconcilable. Even if the other party did not have rank 9 cultivation level, they were quasi-rank 9. Against such an enemy, Fang Yuan felt deep pressure. Right now, Spectral Soul's main body is still trapped in the dream realm. But he has planned for tens of thousands of years, he definitely has backup plans. Xianxia is his split soul, he is now in my body with his whereabouts unknown. Most importantly, Zombie Alliance is finished, while Shadow Sect lost terribly. How much foundation does this secretive super force have left? And, in the 500 years of my previous life, did Shadow Sect and Spectral Soul succeed? His new body was very useful. In just a moment, Fang Yuan thought of many things, the thoughts in his mind collided into one another, causing intense reactions. I should connect to Treasure Yellow Heaven first. Fang Yuan cleared his mind. It only took a bit of time for him to absorb the information regarding the sovereign immortal aperture, there was no big issue. He used connecting Heaven Gu and Divine Sense Gu, easily finding Treasure Yellow Heaven. Treasure Yellow Heaven was the #1 market for Gu immortals of the 5 regions, it had a huge origin. It was formed from a Gu immortal's grotto heaven and a large immemorial Yellow Heaven fragment. Yellow Heaven, of the immemorial 9 heavens, was of the same level as White Heaven and Black Heaven. Even when a mortal raises their head, they would see White Heaven and Black Heaven. When a Gu immortal uses connecting Heaven Gu, they could sense Treasure Yellow Heaven, which was like a torch in the darkness. His attempt at connecting to Treasure Yellow Heaven was very successful. Soon, within Fang Yuan's sovereign immortal aperture, there was a smooth mirror. Inside, he could see Treasure Yellow Heaven. Fang Yuan activated Divine Sense Gu, sending his thoughts inside. In a short time, he found Little Hu Immortal. In accordance with Fang Yuan's instructions before he left, Little Hu Immortal had been keeping her connecting Heaven Gu open the entire time. After rebirth, even though Fang Yuan did not know how the Battle of Tian Mountain would turn out, he knew that if he was exposed, Hu Immortal Blessed Land would be besieged by Central Continent Gu Immortals. The Dragonfish and Eerie Fire Dragon Pythons inside Hu Immortal Blessed Land had already been shifted into Star Form Blessed Land. Hu Immortal Blessed Land only had Dang Hun Mountain, several Fang Yuan stone nests, and a large number of hairy man slaves left. In the underground cave, there was Wisdom Gu, as well as the Sword Path Immortal Gu that Fang Yuan had taken from Immortal Zombie Bo Qing. Dang Hun Mountain was kept in Hu Immortal Blessed Land so that he could easily sell Guts Gu. After all, Hu Immortal Blessed Land was connected to Spirit Affinity House and Immortal Crane Sect. If it were in Star Form Blessed Land, it could be easily deduced. There was another point, Hu Immortal Blessed Land was an Enslavement Path Blessed Land, it had a larger number of Enslavement Path Dao marks, it could allow Fang Yuan to manage the hairy man slaves more easily. If these hairy men were moved to Star Form Blessed Land, they would not be as obedient, and would not refine Gu as enthusiastically. Even though hairy men were variant humans, they had emotions, their attitude to work varied. Of course, Fong Yuan was considering He Lulan and Blazing Heaven Demonis as well. As for Wisdom Gu, Fong Yuan wanted to relocate it the most. But Fong Yuan did not have this ability. Back then, his agreement with Wisdom Gu was made under a special situation. Fong Yuan and Little Hu Immortal quickly connected. "Is it Master?" Little Hu Immortal was joyous as she asked this. "It's me." Fong Yuan answered. "It really is Master. Quickly confirm the secret code with me." Little Hu Immortal said again. The two confirmed the code as Little Hu Immortal said happily, "Master, are you okay? I miss you so much." Fong Yuan laughed. He told Little Hu Immortal some important details as he told her to use Plan B Section C. All along, Fong Yuan had been facing a lot of mental pressure. He was worried that Central Continent's Gu Immortals would attack Hu Immortal Blessed Land. To minimize his losses, Fong Yuan used the light of wisdom and deduced many plans to deal with many situations. Furthermore, he gave these plans to Little Hu Immortal. It was good to prepare in advance. But after hearing his words, Little Hu Immortal thought about that plan and was stunned. She spoke as she cried, "Master, Master, you don't want me anymore? I am very obedient, I will listen to Master more from now on." Heh. Fong Yuan laughed, "Don't worry, Plan B Section C has been recently edited. Act according to it and the other party will not truly accept you." Little Hu Immortal smiled through her tears. She trusted Fong Yuan completely, she did not doubt his judgment. She followed this plan and contacted Xianxia Land Spirit. Over on Xianxia Land Spirit's end, Fong Yuan had already told him long ago. After all, he was the external supreme elder of Xianxia sect. Xianxia Land Spirit quickly dispatched a group of rank 6 hairy man Gu Immortals, using a stargate to get to Hu Immortal Blessed Land. They displayed the ancient battle formation, Heavenly Giant Solar, turning into a giant and carrying Dang Hun Mountain, before placing it in the immortal aperture of one of the hairy man Gu Immortals and going back to Xianxia Blessed Land through the stargate. Little Hu Immortal next brought them to Wisdom Gu. The hairy man Gu Immortals were stunned. They transmitted the information back to Xianxia Land Spirit, and after his shock, he used his methods to convince Wisdom Gu to enter one of their immortal apertures, before going back to Xianxia Blessed Land. After learning about this outcome, Fong Yuan relaxed. He had no choice but to expose Wisdom Gu to Xianxia Land Spirit out of necessity. The outcome was that Xianxia Land Spirit did not disappoint Fong Yuan. He was an obsession of the rank 8 long-hair ancestor after all. Back then, long-hair ancestors' refinement path attainment had exceeded that of 2 venerables, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable and Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable. He was the #1 refinement path immortal of all times. He had an unfathomable foundation. Some people in the future who researched him conjectured that long-hair ancestor's limitation was that he was a hairy man variant human. If he were a normal human Gu Immortal, he might have reached the supreme realm of rank 9. After Xianxia Land Spirit transported Wisdom Gu to Xianxia Blessed Land, Fong Yuan contacted Star Form Blessed Land and sent Luo Pa Valley, which was inside, to Xianxia Blessed Land as well. This way, Dang Hun Mountain and Xianxia Blessed Land were both inside Xianxia Blessed Land. Even if fixed immortal travel did not self-detonate and Xianxia obtained it, he would go to Dang Hun Mountain or Luo Pa Valley, and Xianxia sect would have to deal with the danger instead. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1029, Vital Immortal Gu, Dog Shit Luck. Chapter 1029, Vital Immortal Gu, Dog Shit Luck. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. The relocation of Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land is also settled now. Fong Yuan could finally exhale a breath of relief after completing this matter. He considered defeat before considering victory. After this matter was settled, no matter how Xianxia reacted, Fong Yuan's losses would already be reduced greatly. It was interesting, actually, under a series of odd events, his and Xianxia's statuses had swapped. Fong Yuan aspired to attain eternal life. A physical body to him was no different to a bag of flesh, and he felt no reluctance in altering it. What he cared about were 3 aspects. First, his original body's Gu worms. Second, the cultivation resources he accumulated in Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land. Third, the relations with He Lu Lan, Tai Bai Yun Sheng, Langya Land Spirit, Spirit Affinity House, Immortal Crane Sect and others. Fong Yuan gazed at the dark sky, the mountain winds shaking the branches of the pine tree he was resting on. He pondered, by this time, fixed immortal travel should have already self-destructed. Next, the other Gu worms will self-destruct one after the other. I wonder how Ing Wuxia will deal with this. There is little to no hope for me in taking these Gu worms back now. The resources of Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land have already been moved. Hu Immortal Blessed Land has fallen into the hands of Central Continent's Gu Immortals, and Star Form Blessed Land is hidden deep within Earth Abyss. Now, only the third matter remains, He Lu Lan, Tai Bai Yun Sheng and others. Fong Yuan carefully pondered. Regarding the third aspect, the relations with Central Continent's Spirit Affinity House and Immortal Crane Sect were already broken. The truth of Fong Yuan destroying 88 True Yang Building was already exposed everywhere. Heavenly Court would definitely pursue this and find trouble with Fong Yuan. From a certain perspective, Ing Wuxia possessing Fong Yuan's physical body meant he would face the disaster for Fong Yuan to an extent. So he did not need to worry about these. What Fong Yuan was worried about were He Lu Lan and Tai Bai Yun Sheng. Fairy Li Shan and Blazing Heaven Demoness were dead. He Lu Lan's value had fallen sharply, but she was still a 10 extreme physique Gu immortal with the great strength true martial physique. Adding in her identity in his previous life as Spirit Affinity House's fairy, as well as her strong luck and formidable character, she absolutely could not be looked down upon. And Tai Bai Yun Sheng might only have 2 immortal Gu, but each of them were top-grade Gu worms with huge practical value. Fong Yuan was extremely worried that these 2 would be used by Ing Wuxia to make difficulties for him. So after he connected with Hu Immortal Blessed Land and Star Form Blessed Land, he immediately tried to communicate with He Lu Lan and Tai Bai Yun Sheng in Treasure Yellow Heaven. They had left behind their wills in Treasure Yellow Heaven. This was a communication method prepared early on. But although Fong Yuan contacted these 2 wills at Treasure Yellow Heaven, he had yet to truly contact the 2 of them. Only when these 2 people connect to Treasure Yellow Heaven and their wills return to their main bodies would they be able to understand and learn the truth. With no contact from them, the worry in Fong Yuan's eyes became even deeper. Without other options, he chose to give up trying for now and contacted Langya Land Spirit. And this time, he obtained a reply almost immediately. "Lad, you finally contacted me." Langya Land Spirit appeared extremely excited as he called out. In truth, he had agreed to help Fong Yuan relocate the resources mainly due to Fong Yuan's status as a member of Langya sect. But when he saw Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pa Valley and especially Wisdom Gu, he was completely dumbstruck with amazement. To sum it up in a single word, he was shocked. He had never expected Fong Yuan's hidden accumulations to be so deep. So deep to the extent it made him unable to believe it. Hearing Langya Land Spirit's words, Fong Yuan smiled. It was as if he was looking at the land spirit, with hair all over his body, like a gorilla jumping around with an exaggerated appearance. Langya Land Spirit originated from long-hair ancestor. He was extremely special as he was formed from 2 obsessions. This current obsession was filled with aggressiveness, wholeheartedly wanting to make hairy men the rulers, the masters of the 5 regions, suppressing humans. Compared to the previous sagely-looking land spirit, this one was more erratic. But no matter which one, land spirits could not lie, they were frank and honest. Fong Yuan could be much more at ease in dealing with the land spirit than human Gu immortals who were able to hide their intentions from him. Seeing that Fong Yuan was keeping quiet, Langya Land Spirit could not endure it and continued speaking. "Fong Yuan, Langya sect has done a huge favor for you this time. What if you lost these? Wouldn't you want to smash your own head and die? So how will you repay me?" Pausing for a while, Fong Yuan heard Langya Land Spirit speak again. "Lad, contribute these things to the sect. I absolutely won't let you suffer a loss. You are our external supreme elder. I will give you an uncountable number of sect contribution points, enough to exchange for countless immortal Gu recipes and immortal Gu. Since Fang Yuan had asked Langya Land's spirit for help, he naturally was already mentally prepared. Anyone who saw Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pavilion Wisdom Gu would definitely be moved. Even Langya Land's spirit was not an exception. Langya Land's spirit might be straightforward and stubborn, with a one-track mind, but he was not without intelligence. Fang Yuan calmly replied, I am Langya Sect's external supreme elder, these are all mine. First elder, you are not thinking of embezzling my possessions, right? He. Langya Land's spirit grabbed at his hair while yelling, if I had known this beforehand, would not have let you join Langya Sect. I could have directly confiscated these supreme treasures if so. Damn it, I told the truth again. Fang Yuan laughed. Back then, Langya Land's spirit sincerely wanted Fang Yuan to join Langya Sect. Now that both sides had already set the agreement, it was too late for Langya Land's spirit to go against it. At least by his current means, he was not able to breach the agreement. Even if he wanted to renege on the agreement, he needed to prepare for some time to break the information path agreement between the two sides. Even so, because he could not lie, Fang Yuan just needed to probe slightly to extract the information. Just based on this point, Fang Yuan already had Langya Land's spirit firmly in his grasp. After some careful thinking, Fang Yuan still felt it was better to leave Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pavilion Wisdom Gu in Langya Blessed Land. Dang Hun Mountain and Luo Pavilion were two treasure troves once held by Spectral Soul Demon Venerable. If fixed immortal travel hadn't been destroyed, wouldn't it mean Wu Xia and others could casually return to these two places? If Fang Yuan placed these two treasure troves in his own immortal aperture, that would be a huge mistake, it would be opening the door for robbers, letting a wolf into one's house. As for Wisdom Gu, Fang Yuan could not use it for the moment. He had now revived with a new physical body, unlike his previous immortal zombie body. In his immortal zombie body, Fang Yuan had no need to fear the light of wisdom. But right now, if he entered this light, his lifespan would start decreasing, which was a price Fang Yuan could not accept. So from now on, unless he had no alternative, it was better to not use Wisdom Gu. I have obtained the sovereign immortal aperture but lost the support of Wisdom Gu. It can be considered that there are losses along with the gains. But, there will be a day I will find a method to use Wisdom Gu with a living body. During this period of time, it is better to let Langya Land's spirit safeguard Wisdom Gu, saving me from worrying about it. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan said to Langya Land's spirit, First Supreme Elder, you want me to present these three treasures to the sect, that is impossible. But we can cooperate. I can lend Dang Hun Mountain, Luo Pavilion Wisdom Gu for the sect's use. The sect will be in charge of safekeeping them. If anything unexpected happens, you will have to compensate me 10 times over. Besides this, you need to compensate me with some sect contribution points too. Langya Land's spirit was jubilant, almost dancing with joy as he shouted, Lad, you are quite tactful. That's good, that's good. With Dang Hun Mountain and Luo Pavilion, I can let these children refine and strengthen their souls. It will be a huge help to their Gu refinement. Also Wisdom Gu, this is a rank 9 Gu of Wisdom Path, in the past it was the vital Gu of Star Constellation Immortal Venerable, Using it to deduce immortal Gu recipes is simply too wonderful. From the land spirit's tone, he actually knew how to use Wisdom Gu. Fang Yuan could not help asking. Langya Land's spirit was not stupid, replying with a chuckle, you want to know the method to use Wisdom Gu, then exchange for it with contribution points. Our Langya sect is fair. Both sides negotiated for a while before completing the matter of collaboration. Fang Yuan then casually mentioned the featherman Zhou Zhong. This variant human was Fang Yuan's slave, but it was not impossible for this relation to be exposed. Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lu Lan knew of Zhou Zhong, he was already exposed. It was better to let him lead those feathermen to stay in Langya Blessed Land for the time being. In any case, Langya Blessed Land's space was extremely huge. Of course, it was unable to compare with Fang Yuan's sovereign immortal aperture in terms of potential future space. As for those hairy man slaves in the Fang Yuan stone nests, after Fang Yuan haggled with Langya land spirit, these hairy man slaves still belonged to Fang Yuan, but he had to remove their slave status. They could only be considered Fang Yuan subordinates in Langya's sect. Because of his identity, Langya land spirit had deep love for hairy men and disdain for other races, having a doctrine that hairy men were to be the rulers. Naturally, he would not let Fang Yuan continue to order these hairy men as slaves. It was already extraordinary for him to still let these hairy men be subordinate to Fang Yuan, not arguing about it. Fang Yuan was actually quite happy about this. These hairy men were now free and belonged to Langya blessed land. But as long as Fang Yuan mobilized them to refine Gu, they would have to obey his orders, which was not much different from beforehand. These hairy men would even be nurtured by Langya land spirit, building their own families and working in the blessed land, which would stimulate their passion for Gu refinement and increase their work efficiency. Finally, Fang Yuan briefly informed Langya land spirit about the matter regarding Ying Wuxia and Shadow sect. Langya land spirit listened on while staring blankly, and only a long time after Fang Yuan finished talking did he react. So you even had read Lotus Demon Venerable's Vital Immortal Gu, Spring Autumn Cicada. Langya land spirit cried out again, lad, what kind of dog shit luck do you have? No, don't tell me you even have Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's Vital Immortal Gu, dog shit luck. So Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's Vital Immortal Gu was actually dog shit luck. Not fortune rivaling heaven Gu. Langya land spirit snorted. He refined fortune rivaling heaven in his later years. In his early years, it was dog shit luck. I had cooperated with him when I was alive, how would I not know? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1030, Making He Lulon Defect. Chapter 1030, Making He Lulon Defect. Translator. Atlas Studios. Editor. Atlas Studios. Fang Yuan had a peculiar expression. This was the first time he was hearing about dog shit luck, this strange-sounding immortal Gu. In the current situation, it was not a big deal to expose Spring-Autumn Cicada. Heavenly Court's Gu immortals already knew about it, that meant the 10 great ancient sects also knew of it, the entire world would basically know of it. Langya land spirit continued, it is a pity that this Spring-Autumn Cicada is only rank 6, if it were the former rank 9 Spring-Autumn Cicada, you would definitely obtain victory. Since Spring-Autumn Cicada is in Ying Wuxia's hands, you cannot allow him to use it. But thankfully, I have quite a few time path methods. Spring-Autumn Cicada is only rank 6 and I know who has it, it is quite easy to counter it. Counter Spring-Autumn Cicada. Fang Yuan felt great interest, in fact, this was his biggest worry currently. Langya land spirit said, Spring-Autumn Cicada is merely rank 6, so be it if we do not know who owns it, but since we know, it is easy to deal with. It might be Red Lotus Demon Venerable's Vital Immortal Gu, but so what? There are only invincible Gu masters, there are no invincible Gu worms. In the entire world, time path is not the strongest, all of the different paths have their strengths. But if we use time path methods, it would be more effective as a counter. Fang Yuan heard this and nodded, feeling that Langya land spirit's words made a lot of sense. Like just earlier, he used Spring-Autumn Cicada to rebirth and was used by Shadow sect after they deduced it. This was a classic example of wisdom path countering time path. Spring-Autumn Cicada had its unique ability, but it was not invincible. Man is the spirit of all living beings, Gu are the essence of heaven and earth. The world was balanced, it made sense that Spring-Autumn Cicada was countered by other methods. Since rebirth, I have been treating Spring-Autumn Cicada as my greatest trump card. To think that I would need to deal with it one day. Fang Yuan sighed internally. When he was contacting Langya land spirit, at the same time in Central Continent. Mingtang Valley. This valley that was bathed in light all year round was famous in Central Continent. It was under control of Wind Cloud Manor and Heavenly Lotus sect, two of the 10 great ancient sects, it was famous in Central Continent for being among the best places to produce light path Gu worms. This land of treasures was incredibly rich in light path Dao marks. Almost every 20 years, there would be wild light path immortal Gu formed. Deep in this Ming Tang Valley, there was a hidden demonic path Gu immortal. Unmoving mountain, Gong Sun Liang. Suddenly, he opened his eyes from his deep sleep. Oh. Someone is calling me. He muttered lightly, the suspicious expression on his face faded at once, turning into a serious and solemn expression. His consciousness entered his immortal aperture as he used a special information path method to communicate. Boss, you want to borrow my immortal Gu? On the other end, in a deep part of Earth Abyss, Xia answered, yes. Gong Sun Liang opened his eyes, without any sleepiness left. He was very hesitant, his gaze was flickering. He was a demonic path Gu immortal, he had been chased and suppressed by Central Continent's righteous path, especially the 10 great ancient sects. He lived like a fugitive. During one of his near-fatal escapes, he fell into a trap and nearly died. At that time, he was saved by a mysterious man. Gong Sun Liang not only kept his life, under the lead of the mysterious man, he joined a mysterious organization. This organization was called Defy. The members of the organization were identified with numbers, they were very mysterious. Gong Sun Liang had obtained much help from this organization. If not for that, he would not have been able to escape up until now, without getting caught by the 10 great ancient sects. As time passed, he saw the importance of this organization, and had some guesses towards the motives of this organization. This organization's codename shows the time the person joined, and their status in the organization. Boss is at the top, he is the person who created Defy. He suddenly wants to borrow my Gu. After hesitating for a long time, Gong Sun Liang gritted his teeth and nodded in agreement. Central Continent, Great Heavenly Sword Sect. Two Sword Path Gu immortals, Miao Jun and Miao Yu, were discussing the matters of their sect. Suddenly, Miao Jun's body shook, he received the information that Xia sent. Facing Xia's request, Miao Jun was very hesitant. He said to Miao Yu, the boss contacted me, he wants to borrow our immortal Gu. Miao Yu frowned, this boss is very mysterious. We have only joined Defy for a short time, we have not heard about the boss information. But the moment he contacted us, he wants to borrow immortal Gu. Miao Jun nodded, we joined Defy because we wanted their help. But earlier, when trying to leave Immortal Crane sect, they did not provide us any help. And now, they want to borrow immortal Gu from us, this boss is truly shameless. A few years ago, someone in Great Heavenly Sword Sect ascended to immortal. Thus, this force had 3 Gu immortals. Great Heavenly Sword Sect was a subsidiary force of Immortal Crane sect. After having 3 Gu immortals, they wanted to get rid of their vassal status from Immortal Crane sect. Unfortunately, they did not succeed. Immortal Crane sect's plan worked and they lured their 3rd Gu immortal away. After this matter, Great Heavenly Sword Sect was taken care of by Immortal Crane sect. Miao Jun and Miao Yu's lives were getting tough. The two wanted to borrow the strength of Defy, but their wishes were not granted, thus they were not happy. As a result, Xia failed to borrow their Gu using his identity as the boss. Bang! In Earth Abyss, in a secret room, Xia slammed the table in front of him, smashing it. Humph! Miao Jun, Miao Yu. Xia gritted his teeth, his expression was dark. This organization called Defy was created by Shadow Sect. Central Continent was different from the other 4 regions, Heavenly Court ruled over it, its subsidiary forces, the 10 great ancient sects, split up most of Central Continent's resources and controlled it tightly. Below the 10 great ancient sects, there were countless forces trying to survive. People looked up to bigger forces, who would not want to improve. Who would not want to expand their territory and obtain more resources for themselves. Especially Gu immortals, they had to face tribulations once in a while. Thus, Gu immortals were forced to improve, otherwise, they would die from the calamities and tribulations. It was not so easy to increase one's strength. One couldn't cook a meal without the ingredients, the most important thing was the lack of resources. But the 10 great ancient sects had incredible strength, they occupied most resources. The other forces could not gather enough strength to influence their control. People with aspirations noticed this and interacted with one another, forming all sorts of alliances. But these alliances did not last long. Because Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects sowed discord between them, or the members of the alliance went into internal conflicts themselves. Of course, the fundamental problem was insufficient strength to challenge Central Continent's 10 great ancient sects. Shadow Sect thus secretly created the organization Defy, selecting the members carefully and getting stronger. But this was only a casual move. Even the Shadow Sect member who created the organization Defy back then did not have much expectations. The more members there were, the more inflated the organization was, and the more complex and hard to manage it was. Furthermore, these members were not otherworldly demons, they were not even fate escapees. They could not be used to resist heaven's will. Thus, back then, Spectral Soul's Gu refinement plan did not involve these people. If he mobilized them, would they listen? Even if they did, there was a high chance that heaven's will would make use of them, it was not worth it. But at this moment, Shadow Sect's plan failed, they were dealt a huge blow. After rebirth, Xianxia had to make use of the strength of Defy. His experience in borrowing Gu was not very successful. Most Gu immortals gave lots of excuses. Immortal Gu were very precious, the identities of the members of Defy were kept secret, they did not know each other, the organization was not strict in enforcement. How difficult would it be to borrow Gu? Only people like Unmoving Mountain Gong Sun Liang, these demonic path Gu immortals without any support would need to make use of Defy in order to escape from the pursuit of Central Continent's righteous path, and avoid deductions. He could not leave Defy, thus, even if he did not want to, he had to take a risk and lend the immortal Gu to Xianxia. Xianxia tried for a long time to borrow Gu, while Fang Yuan's Gu worms were in the processing of self-detonating one by one. Eventually, even though Xianxia managed to suppress them, and prevented the Gu worms from continuing to self-detonate, his losses were severe. Fang Yuan, good job. You are really resolute in cutting your losses. In the darkness, Xianxia had a grim expression, but only a person with your caliber would be able to obtain sovereign immortal fetus Gu, after all. After suppressing Fang Yuan's Gu worms, Xianxia used the borrowed immortal Gu to get rid of Fang Yuan's fake will in his mind. Just as he was about to continue and use the immortal Gu to make Fang Yuan's Gu worms his, he had a feeling as he noticed He Lu Lan's actions. He Lu Lan was sitting on a rock bed, opening her eyes. She was frowning, as worry flashed across deeply in her eyes. In the room, from a corner within the darkness, Xianxia's voice could be heard, He Lu Lan, you can stop trying. In this place, it is impossible for you to use connecting heaven Gu to reach treasure yellow heaven. He Lu Lan's gaze shined, she was about to speak. At this moment, Xianxia continued, you don't have to pretend and lie to me. I know you are suspicious of my identity, then I will tell you. That's right, I am not Fang Yuan, I am Xianxia. He Lu Lan's expression changed. She was not Tai Bai Yunsheng, she was not easy to fool. After Fang Yuan woke up, he acted strangely. He Lu Lan held back her suspicions because they had to use fixed immortal travel to escape first. But to think that Xianxia brought her here. There was a super Gu formation here, the defenses were tight, actually preventing connecting heaven Gu from use, she could not connect to treasure yellow heaven. After He Lu Lan failed to reach treasure yellow heaven, she realized that Xianxia's identity was even more suspicious. But now, Xianxia directly told her the truth, He Lu Lan did not know how to react. You know my identity. Xianxia's voice continued, I am one of Spectral Soul Demon Venerable's split souls, I took over Fang Yuan's body. You have two choices now, one is to die, the other is to abandon Fang Yuan and join me. For Xianxia, He Lu Lan had the great strength true martial physique, and was someone who escaped fate, she was a high-quality pawn. But if He Lu Lan did not know what was good for her, he would kill her with no reservations. He could use He Lu Lan's corpse to revive his current body. Using the Gu formation here, Wu Xia was completely confident in taking down He Lu Lan. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know in the report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible.